Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Chelsea knows the person who kidnapped her is none other than Allison. The revelation doesn't come as a sudden thunderclap but rather as a slow, suffocating recognition, a sinking feeling that every interaction, every familiar voice in the dark, had only been leading her toward this inevitable truth. Allison, once a close acquaintance teetering on the edge of obsession, had stepped fully into the role of captor, the fractured pieces of her mind piecing together a warped reality where Chelsea belonged to her alone. The first moments of Chelsea's imprisonment set the tone, her wrists bound, the room heavy with the scent of dust and stale perfume, a flickering bulb above her casting distorted shadows along the walls. The air was tight, suffused with Allison's presence even when she wasn't physically there. It was more than claustrophobia. It was the creeping horror of realizing that escape wasn't just about slipping out of ropes or locked doors. It was about confronting a woman unhinged, a woman who had convinced herself that Chelsea was hers. Chelsea knew that resisting Allison outright was a gamble. Every word that left her lips, every look of defiance, carried the weight of risk. Yet something inside her refused to cower. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps the raw instinct to fight for her identity. But instead of bowing to Allison's delusions, she chose to confront them. Each challenge Chelsea threw was like gasoline on a simmering fire. Allison, once barely tethered to rational thought, began to unravel further under the strain. Her voice grew shriller, her movements more erratic, her eyes widening as though the refusal of her fantasy was a physical wound inflicted upon her. This was not the kind of opponent one could negotiate with. This was someone who might destroy the very thing she claimed to love, if only to keep it from belonging to anyone else. Back at the Dupree estate, tension mounted with every passing hour. Their once orderly lives torn apart by Chelsea's disappearance. Bill and Annie were relentless, refusing to let fear paralyze them. Their daughter's absence had carved a hole into their lives, but rather than succumb to despair, they wielded their grief like a weapon. They mobilized every connection, every ounce of influence and resource at their disposal. Private investigators were contacted, networks of informants tapped, and a bounty offered a staggering reward to anyone who could provide information leading to Chelsea's safe return. Their faces appeared weary, their voices strained, but their determination was ironclad. They could not, and would not, allow Allison's madness to consume their daughter's future. Kat and Jacob, Chelsea's closest friends, took the investigation into their own hands. Where the family's efforts spread wide into the world, Kat and Jacob tunneled deep into the personal. They hacked into Chelsea's social accounts, searching for patterns, hidden messages, or suspicious interactions that might have gone unnoticed before. Each login felt invasive, a betrayal of Chelsea's privacy, yet desperation overrode hesitation. They scrolled through photographs, combed through conversations, and dissected digital breadcrumbs, their eyes red from lack of sleep. Yet, for all their effort, there was nothing. Chelsea's life appeared pristine, ordinary, without a trace of the storm brewing underneath. The silence of her online presence felt like another kind of cruelty, as though the answers were deliberately hiding, taunting them from behind locked screens. It was Anita who eventually stumbled upon the thread that pulled the whole search tighter. Through a late-night trawl of online news and fan forums, she unearthed an article buried beneath the flood of entertainment chatter, a report of a supposed fan determined to meet Chelsea in person. The story seemed innocuous on the surface, just another admirer crossing the blurred lines between celebrity and obsession, but Anita's instincts sharpened when she read deeper. This wasn't just any fan. The descriptions, though vague, mirrored Allison's behavior too closely. A pattern emerged in the testimonies, a strange fixation that aligned perfectly with Allison's past tendencies. When Madison pieced the fragments together and voiced the terrifying conclusion, it was like a curtain being pulled back. Allison wasn't just a name from Chelsea's past, she was the present nightmare. The certainty galvanized the group. No longer were they searching blindly. They had a target. And with that, the hunt for Chelsea intensified. Inside her prison, Chelsea felt the shifts in Allison's behavior. Her captor was not content with simply holding her. Allison was crafting a twisted narrative where they were lovers bound by fate. She prepared a scene meant to mimic romance, say a table set with wine glasses, candles dripping wax down their stems, and a faint tune playing from a battered speaker. Allison wore a dress that might have once been elegant, but in the dim light and her unsteady posture, it only heightened the unease. She spoke in soft tones, almost tender, as though trying to recreate a memory that had never truly existed. She told Chelsea that they were destined, that the universe had always intended for them to be together. Every word was a script Allison had written in her own fractured mind, and Chelsea, bound and forced into the role of co-star, felt the suffocation of playing along. But Chelsea wasn't willing to let Allison's fantasy breathe. When the wine glass was pressed into her hand, she didn't sip. Instead, with a sudden flick of defiance, she hurled its contents across the table. The red liquid splashed against Allison's face, streaking her with crimson like a grotesque mask. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the soft hiss of candle flames. Then Allison screamed, the sound raw and piercing, her hands slamming onto the table with such force the glasses rattled. She lunged forward, gripping Chelsea's wrist so tightly the pain shot up her arm. The pressure was excruciating, and Chelsea bit back a cry, refusing to give Allison the satisfaction. Her captor's voice dropped into a chilling growl as she hissed that they would be together forever. It wasn't a threat in Allison's mind, it was a vow. Yet Chelsea, through the haze of pain, found her own voice. Steady and unbroken, she told Allison the truth she didn't want to heart-hat. Love built on fear and control wasn't love at all, and that Allison would never, could never, own her heart. Allison's face twisted, torn between rage and despair, her eyes flickering like a storm at sea. To be denied was unbearable. To be resisted was blasphemy. But Chelsea's defiance planted a seed of doubt, a reminder that despite the ropes and the locked doors, she was not conquered. The clash of wills became the true battleground, more dangerous than any physical escape attempt. Chelsea knew that surviving meant enduring Allison's madness long enough for her family to reach her. Every moment became a test of patience, every word a gamble between provoking too far or holding ground. She clung to the hope that outside these suffocating walls, the people she loved were closing in, that every second she endured was another second closer to freedom. Yet the clock was ticking. Allison's grip on reality was splintering faster with each rejection, and Chelsea understood with chilling clarity that her captor's obsession could just as easily end in violence as it could in escape. The night loomed heavy, the candles burning low, and Chelsea sat amidst the wreckage of Allison's fantasy, her spirit unbroken but her body trapped, waiting for the moment the world outside would finally collide with the nightmare inside. Outside the confines of Allison's crumbling hideaway, the Dupree family tightened their circle of strategy. Bill paced the length of his study, his phone pressed against his ear as he issued orders with a tone that wavered between fury and desperation. Danny sat at the desk with a spread of maps and documents scattered before her, drawing lines between sightings, reports, and the scarce leads they had been able to confirm. Each mark on the paper felt like both progress and torment, another reminder that Chelsea was somewhere on that map, waiting for them, while time slipped mercilessly away. Kat and Jacob were relentless, refusing to surrender to exhaustion. They pored over the fragments of Chelsea's digital footprint, desperate for something they might have overlooked. They analyzed timestamps, cross-checked locations, and even compared fan interactions that seemed out of place. The deeper they dug, erasing trails wherever she could. What unsettled Kat the most was not what they found but what was missing. The silence was too clean, too deliberate, as though Allison had anticipated their every move. Anita's discovery of the fan report proved to be more than just a clue, it became a pivot point. She pressed forward with determination, scouring through every article, every comment thread connected to it. Her instincts told her that somewhere within the noise, a sliver of truth remained unguarded. Madison, usually quieter than the rest, became the voice of conviction. Her certainty about Allison was unwavering, and she urged the family to focus every effort on tracing the woman's past. Allison had patterns, places she once frequented, contacts she once trusted. Somewhere in those details was the location Chelsea was being held. Meanwhile, inside the dimly lit prison of Allison's making, Chelsea fought to maintain a balance between resistance and survival. Every word she spoke seemed to fracture Allison further, Yet silence was no safer. She felt the tension building with each passing hour, Allison's mood swinging violently between manic affection and seething rage. Sometimes Allison would sit beside her, speaking in soft tones about their imagined future, painting pictures of shared lives that twisted reality into grotesque caricatures of romance. At other times, she would erupt without warning, her grip bruising, her eyes wild, as though Chelsea's mere existence was a challenge to her control. The candles from the night of the so-called celebration had burned out, leaving the room colder, darker, and heavier. Allison carried the remnants of the failed evening like a wound. She replayed it over and over in her mind, unable to let go of the image of wine splashed across her skin, of Chelsea's unwavering defiance. That rejection gnawed at her, stoking her fury and pushing her deeper into delusion. She muttered to herself when she thought Chelsea was asleep, her words weaving between promises of eternal unity and threats of destruction if Chelsea continued to resist. The Dupree's search pressed onward, building momentum. Bill's connections in law enforcement began feeding him fragments of information, sightings of a woman matching Allison's description in outlying areas, purchases made under assumed names, and surveillance footage that hinted at her movements. Danny's resolve hardened with each discovery. She wasn't just a mother searching for her daughter, she was a strategist coordinating a rescue. Her eyes burned from sleepless nights, but her mind was sharp, piecing together the puzzle Allison had tried so hard to scatter. Kat, refusing to accept failure, broke deeper into old databases and unearthed fragments of Allison's life that had long been buried: addresses, phone numbers, rental records that hinted at forgotten properties. Jacob cross-referenced them with recent transactions, narrowing the possibilities. Each new lead brought them closer, though the weight of uncertainty bore down on them all. Anita, who had once stumbled upon the fan article, now became the moral anchor, reminding the group that Chelsea's survival depended not just on speed but precision. A mistake could trigger Allison into doing something irreversible. Madison's quiet conviction lent weight to every discussion. Her voice, though soft, carried the clarity of truth. Allison was unraveling, and the family's window to intervene was closing. Back in captivity, Chelsea's body grew weaker, but her will remained iron. She knew her family would not abandon her. She could feel their fight in her bones, even if she couldn't see it. Allison, sensing her resolve, began escalating her tactics. She locked the door tighter, kept closer watch, and whispered threats in the darkness about what would happen if Chelsea ever tried to run. Yet Chelsea saw the cracks. Allison's paranoia was mounting, her sleeplessness making her careless. Her hands trembled more often, her words grew contradictory. And in those fleeting moments of incoherence, Chelsea recognized opportunity. The night came when Allison's desperation reached a fever pitch. She set another table, this time with even greater care, as though determined to erase the memory of failure. She draped the space in soft fabrics, lit rows of candles, and played the same song again, hoping to force Chelsea into the rhythm of her delusion. Her voice quivered as she spoke of forever, of devotion, of a love that no rejection could sever. But Chelsea, though exhausted, held her ground. She refused the glass again, her eyes unwavering as she repeated the words Allison could not bear, that this was not love, that Allison could never bend her into belonging. The fury that followed was immediate and terrifying. Allison's scream shattered the fragile ambience, her hand striking the table so violently the glasses shattered. She clutched Chelsea's face in her hands, her nails biting into skin, her eyes blazing with a rage that bordered on inhuman. She whispered promises of eternity laced with venom, a twisted oath that sounded more like a death sentence than devotion. Chelsea's breath came in sharp bursts, but she refused to look away. She knew that fear would feed Allison, but defiance kept her anchored to herself. At that very moment, Danny pinpointed the most promising lead yet, an old property tied to Allison's family name, long abandoned but still legally connected through obscure records. The address had been buried beneath layers of outdated paperwork, but cross-checking utility bills revealed sporadic usage lights flickering on in the dead of night, short bursts of water consumption. It was enough. Bill rallied their contacts, while Kat and Jacob compiled every bit of logistical support they could muster. Anita urged caution, her voice trembling at the thought of Chelsea caught in the crossfire, but Madison's eyes told a different story. She knew this was it. This was where Chelsea was. The tension reached its breaking point. Inside the hidden chamber, Chelsea braced herself against Allison's madness, her spirit refusing to fracture even as her body ached from strain. Outside, her family closed in on the location, their desperation sharpening into action. Time stretched thin, the fragile boundary between rescue and tragedy threatening to snap at any moment. Allison's delusions grew louder, her grip tighter, her reality bleeding into violence. Chelsea prayed silently, not for strength because she had clung to that every second of her captivity, but for just one chance, one opening when her family's determination would collide with Allison's crumbling control. And somewhere in the darkness of that night, fate began to align, drawing every thread tighter, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation that would decide whether Chelsea's defiance would be her salvation or her undoing. The night that had stretched endlessly for Chelsea finally reached its tipping point. The air inside the room was suffocating, heavy with the scent of extinguished candles and stale wine, and Allison stood before her trembling with a dangerous mixture of fury and desperation. The silence was broken only by the sound of her uneven breathing, like a predator pacing before the strike. Chelsea sat rigid, every muscle taut, her eyes fixed on Allison's face, refusing to show fear. She knew that one wrong word could be the spark that unleashed the violence Allison had been teetering toward since the beginning. What Chelsea did not know was that outside, her family had closed in. Bill and Danny, accompanied by Kat, Jacob, Anita, and Madison, had reached the old property identified in the search. The house stood hunched in the dark like a secret long buried, its windows boarded, its garden overrun with weeds. The wind rattled loose shutters, creating the illusion of whispers against the night. For a moment, the group stood frozen at the edge of the property, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They were so closer than they had ever been, but the fear of what they might find on the other side of the door threatened to paralyze them. Bill broke the silence first. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he gripped the flashlight. "She's in there. I can feel it." Danny's face was pale, but her eyes blazed with determination. They had come too far, risked too much, to falter now. Kat and Jacob carried the tools they had hastily gathered, while Anita whispered a prayer under her breath. Madison, though quiet, carried herself with a calm certainty that steadied the others. Inside, Allison's voice grew sharper. "Do you see now, Chelsea?" she whispered, pressing closer, her nails still digging into Chelsea's skin. "You and I, we are meant to be. No one else understands. No one else can have you. If you can't love me now, I'll make sure you never leave me." The threat in her tone was unmistakable. A line crossed that turned her obsession into the promise of destruction. Chelsea's heart pounded, but she kept her voice firm. "You can trap me here, you can try to scare me, but you'll never own me. Love doesn't come from cages, Allison. It comes from choice, and I will never choose you." The words ignited something primal in Allison. With a strangled scream, she grabbed a shard of broken glass from the table, holding it in trembling hands as she loomed over Chelsea. For the first time, Chelsea's composure faltered. She pulled against her restraints, her breath sharp with the knowledge that the next seconds could decide everything. Then came the sound that shifted the world: the crash of a door being forced open. The heavy wood splintered as Bill and Jacob pushed their way inside, their voices calling Chelsea's name with raw urgency. Allison froze, her eyes darting toward the noise, her body quivering like a cornered animal. Danny and the others followed close behind, their footsteps pounding through the derelict hallways until they burst into the room. The sight that met them was both a nightmare and a relief. Chelsea bound and bruised, Allison standing over her with a weapon in hand, eyes wide and unhinged. Bill shouted her name, his voice cracking under the strain, while Danny surged forward, only to be held back by Kat, who knew rushing too quickly could trigger Allison into striking. The air was thick with dread, every second dragging like an eternity. "Allison," Madison spoke suddenly, her voice low but steady. She stepped forward, her calmness cutting through the chaos. "Put it down. You don't want to hurt her. You've already lost control. And this eyes is not how you keep her." Allison's gaze snapped toward her, wild and disoriented, the shard trembling in her hand. Madison's eyes never wavered. "If you love her, then don't destroy her. Let her go." The room held its breath. Chelsea seized the moment, summoning the last of her strength. "Allison," she said, her voice softer now but no less firm, "this ends tonight. Whatever you think we had eat was never real. But my family is real. They're here. They're not leaving. And neither am I." The words pierced through the haze of delusion. For a flicker of a moment, Allison's hand faltered, her grip loosening on the shard. It was enough. Jacob lunged, knocking the glass from her grasp, while Bill rushed to untie Chelsea. Allison shrieked, thrashing against them with feral energy, but Kat and Anita pinned her down, their combined strength finally overpowering the storm inside her. When the ropes around Chelsea's wrists fell away, Danny was there first, wrapping her arms around her daughter with a sob that shook her entire body. Chelsea clung to her, the strength she had carried for so long breaking into tears that spilled freely down her face. Bill's arms closed around them both, the family forming an unbreakable shield against the nightmare that had consumed them. Allison's screams echoed through the room as she struggled against restraint, her voice cracking into pleas and curses, her mind unraveling completely under the weight of her shattered fantasy. For the Duprees, it was the sound of an ending final collapse of the danger that had haunted them. Madison stepped back, her expression unreadable, though her eyes shimmered with the quiet sorrow of someone who understood too well the darkness of obsession. The authorities arrived minutes later, summoned by Bill's prior calls, and Allison was taken away in restraints, still screaming Chelsea's name as though refusing to accept the reality of her defeat. The family watched in silence as she was carried out, their relief tempered by the haunting knowledge of how close they had come to losing everything. In the days that followed, healing became its own journey. Chelsea returned home, her body marked by bruises but her spirit unbroken. Danny hovered at her side, unable to let her out of sight, while Bill threw himself into ensuring Allison could never come near them again. Kat and Jacob remained close, their loyalty unshaken, while Anita and Madison found themselves changed by what they had witnessed. Conversations often ended in silence, the weight of memory too heavy for words. But in those silences there was also gratitude that Chelsea had survived, that their family had endured. Chelsea herself carried the deepest scars, though she wore them with quiet strength. At night, she sometimes woke to the sound of Allison's screams echoing in her memory, but she also remembered the moment she stood her ground, the moment she chose not to surrender her will. That defiance had saved her. That defiance had bought her enough time for her family to arrive. Standing in the garden weeks later, Chelsea breathed in the open air with a sense of freedom that felt sharper, more fragile than ever before. The sky stretched wide above her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in safety. Allison's shadow might linger in her mind, but it no longer bound her. She had survived the gates of obsession, of fear, of captivity, and emerged not broken but resolute. And as the Duprees gathered together that evening, their home lit with warmth once more, they knew that while the nightmare would never fully disappear, it had given them something unshakable, a reminder of the strength of family, of the resilience of love, and of the unyielding courage of a daughter who refused to be claimed by madness.